Hello class, welcome back. On this day is what we're going to do is we're going to start to put things together in light of what we did with our perspective with the boxes and then ultimately with the ellipses. And so today we're going to be doing a still life. And the still life you're going to want to at home compose it with maybe 3 to 4 to 5 objects, 5 at the very most, 3 at the very least. And is what you're going to want to do. I've got a little arrangement here for you guys to the left, and is what I've got is 4 objects. And if when you arrange yours, is what you want to do is have one object, like this glass one I have is a little bigger than the others, a little taller than the others. So from my angle, and this is where it'll be a little different, but the best we can do with this video, with this, is I've got it arranged for me kind of in a triangular fashion, kind of like this. And this is coming out, for me, this is coming out this way to this way. So it's angling, for this for me is back, for you it's front. So I'm seeing a triangle here and a triangle here. So to me that works well. The object I put in the back, the only reason I really have it there is so it connects these all together. So it links this to this to this, and so it makes a continuum. And so you're going to be thinking of your objects when you set them up. You want to set it up where there's kind of a hierarchy of shapes. One bigger, the other one's a little smaller. So I got big, smaller, smaller. This one is the unifying factor of them all. The other thing that you're going to do when you do this is when we do draw these, they can overlap each other a little bit. So from my angle, what I'm seeing is this edge overlaps this thing. And of course, this overlaps that a little. For you guys, I know it's in the middle. And for me, this is below my eye level. So overlapping is going to be important. And when we do draw with overlapping, we're going to draw right through the object. So I'm going to draw this object as if this one isn't there, and this object as if that one isn't there. We're just going to draw right through. And even if your objects are solid, you're going to do the same thing. Because to get a feel for ellipses, you have to draw all the way through, okay? So, to start this, all of you are going to put on what's, as all of you should know by now, you're going to put on a frame of reference. So I'm going to make a frame of reference a pretty decent size just so that this is visible. And so I'm going to make it about as low as this, about as high as that. And I'm going to come up with a rectangle like this. So this is not representing my paper. This is representing the line you're drawing on your paper. Okay. Now, frames of references can be, depending on what you're drawing. I could do this tall and vertical. This could be a frame of reference, and my objects could be in there. I'm doing more of a square, horizontal, like a rectangle. Or on your piece of paper, it is possible to do a frame of reference. That's more what we call landscape. Landscape would be veering on the horizontal direction. And so your frame of reference on your paper could be like this. It depends on what you're choosing. Mine's kind of, if I box it off, it's kind of squarish. So I'm kind of thinking of it this way. Okay? So depending on how you have your objects set up, how tall they are, what relationship they are, you're going to put them in a frame of reference. Now, usually we start with our biggest one first. So I'm going to start here. And the way that I'm going to think about this is, I want to think about, I'm going to do these ellipses like this. In other words, if I had an object, like I showed you the other day, this top part of my object, say if I have it like say I'm going to think of it like a wine glass. And say if my object is going to be this wide, and my bottom is going to be here. This bottom that I'm thinking about, if it was this, it wouldn't be the front, it would be where the side is. So you guys are seeing it like this from the front. So where the stem meets is where the side is, so I'd be running a line there because this is a curve going to my side. So what would happen is if this is a wine glass, and say if the neck of it, or this is coming down to here, this would say be like this, and say if it's like this, and then I've got and I'm thinking of the shape of this thing like this. I'm just coming up with something as convex, concave lines, and then the stem or the neck of it is doing this. You always have your center line, and then say if this is coming down like this is going to represent the center. This is the center, meaning when I do the ellipse, I'm going to say I'm going to look down on this about this much. And there's two ways to do these ellipses. I just want to show you this large so you can get this idea. So this is my flat edge, dead center here. And then is what I'm going to do is put this ellipse. So one way to do the ellipse, the shorthand way is just do this. Just connect the points and try to get a good curve off of it, okay? That'll give us a curve like we're looking down. But at every plane break, in other words, every horizontal line, like here, represents another ellipse. That means I have to discover where this ellipse is, and this has got to touch my two edges, where that is. So now the glass is going to make a curve down like this, okay? And so this now has a curve to it. This stem would have a curve to it, and so it starts to take on the feeling of depth. This in the back, say if this is the front part, this is the back part of where it comes through. I'm going to make another ellipse in there, so I'm looking down on this, so this now would be this way. The stem would then be in the middle, which is another ellipse, which I would do that again, okay? So all of those center lines become important in order to curve it out, okay? In order to come up with our edge. The other way of thinking about this, if this is just the top of the box, and this way is the more effective way. So if this is your straight, here's just say a cylinder coming up, is what we would do if I'm not looking, I'm looking down on a lot. Say I'm looking down on it less, this is how far back I want it to be. So you think of the angle of the plane coming out like this. You would try to get these as symmetrical as you can. The other way is people would run a line and try to get them equal in their distances like this. So that would be like that. And this front would be like this. And then you put the ellipse in the plane. It's got to hit that edge and come around. And that would then be our edge right there in the center, our edge right there in the center. So putting a plane in there is a good way to do it. You can work it out quite well that way. This way is a shorthand way. Either way, you've got a major axis line going this way, and I've got a minor axis line going this way, and they're at 90-degree angles, if you remember. So this is kind of the language that's going to take place here. So I'm estimating this, and when I do, I'm thinking of this line through the center, okay? So I'm going to try to determine how low I want it. For me, the apple, from my angle, the apple is lower than this. And so I've got to say, apple is going to be lower. I'm going to make this here. The top, or not exactly the top, but my middle is going to be here. So you want to know what your lines represent when you place them. So that's going to go there. So when I measure this, and you're going to have to use a sighting stick, so I'm going to have to measure, and I'm going to have to say, where is my midway? So I'm going to measure with my thumb, the way all of us have done in the past. Some of you have been avoiding this on the boxes. A lot of you just converge your lines and you didn't sight them. But anyways, when I measure from the middle of here, and I come up to about the middle of the next one, I'm getting halfway. So my shoulders, as it's called on a vase, I'm going to say is midway. It's so close that it will work out perfectly fine. So that's going to be midway. I'm going to try to get it just a little more accurate. So you want to find your midway, and you want your tallest object in place. This is representing my centers of my ellipses. Okay, so I know what they're representing. I want to know where this is. This is a plane break. So when I measure from here to my midway of the ellipse, midway of my ellipse, I want to find out roughly where is that. And when I do that, it gets me roughly to the midway of this, which is good. That's an easy measurement for me. And when they fall on those. But designers are designing these, and they're designing them with a purpose, and they come up with relationships. So now I've got my midway points measured. This is my widest. Say if I want to make it as wide as this, If I want the object really accurate, I would have to measure that width to the height and see where I go. And so when I measure this width to the height and see where I go, it tells me it can be a little bit wider. So I'm going to do that. So now I'm going to place it. Take your time with these measurements. Now I get it to where the top of that ellipse would be on the back side. So I'm going to check it. And you know, it tells me it could even be a little wider. So I'm going to do that. So I got it pretty close now, so I'm going to leave it. So I know from my height to my width, that's going to be pretty accurate. The bottom, I'm gonna say when I measure it is roughly this. It's a little wider maybe than that distance, not much. So I'm going to, off my center line, it's easy to get symmetry because now we can say what is this distance to what is this distance, and I can also measure up, and I can say where do they come, and this is pretty close, and indeed so is this. So I'm going to do that. Use measuring lines, use these lines, place them in, see where they fall, try to keep things symmetrical. When I come up from the bottom of that, it comes pretty close to this. My ellipse eventually will be a little wider, but so I'm going to keep it very close to what I have it. So with that in mind, this being my center line, is what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this in, or I'm going to make this a touch wider, let's say. And I want to make sure my shoulders still come out wider, and they do. I'm checking now how wide this is to this, and that looks pretty close. So now I know I can connect that point. And so we're going to simplify. We're going to connect this point. So I want to get something down of this object in its two-dimensional sense first. And so we're going to do this. And now from here, I'm going to bring out these shoulders, bring out your curves. So this is going to do this, bring it out, try to keep it symmetrical, and this is going to move in, okay? So a lot of the work is done at the beginning, trying to get these measurements, and I think this is going to be close enough. So we're going to go for that. So now we've got our height and our width is pretty close, and we've got that object, our biggest object in place. We can measure the other ones off of it. So now I can look at the object behind it. Using this as a point of measure, I can put all of my other objects in place, and that's one of the reasons you want your tallest one in. So I can look at the bottom of that. I can sight it and hold this up to the bottom, and where does it come through here? And it's roughly here. And so for me, from my angle, how I'm viewing it, it's horizontal. For you guys, it might not be, but for me, it's horizontal. I'm going to place in a horizontal line. I'm going to look at, again, the middle of this, where the sides would meet, and I'm going to try to, from my angle, which it would be the middle of the handle, so it's a good line for me to think of, and it's going to come roughly to here on this object. I'm going to place it in. So I'm just going to place in these long lines, okay? I'm going to say how much of this do I see through the glass, and when I look at, now this is the middle of it, my ellipse in the back is going to be lower, of course. This ellipse will be lower. All of these ellipses will come down eventually. So I'm keeping that in mind, and you need to keep that in mind as well. This will come lower. So these distances will still be the same because this is going to come down that much. This is going to come down that much eventually when I put the ellipses in. So anyways, I've got that. Now I'm going to look at the edge of the side of the vase, and I'm going to say there's a slight angle to it, and it's like this. So I think it's a little too wide on this side, so I'm going to bring it in a little bit. Now the question is, how wide is it? So I'm going to measure it, and I'm going to use this as a point of measure. So I'm going to measure the width of this object, and I'm going to bring it into my other one. So measure one object to the next. So I'm taking this one, and I'm measuring it from the bottom of that one, and it comes roughly to here, and that looks about right. So I'm going to do that with it. So there's a slight angle to it like this, and we're going to keep it about that size for its relationship. The handle, this is going to represent the center of it, the very center of it, because the line's coming through the center. And I'm going to say, where does it go? and I'm going to run it through, and for me it comes about this far. So I'm going to run it all the way to there. It does come a little further, but you know what? I don't think it would look good in the drawing, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it just to where I've got it. I don't want it to touch that edge. I don't think it would work well. So sometimes we'll make subtle decision changes from reality, so in the end it works. Now, this other object, I'm going to place it. So I watch its stem, the center of it for me, and how far, what is the negative space? The negative space is the space between things. What is the space between it? So I'm going to say how low is it, and through the center, and it's about this much lower. And this is what's going to happen. It's about placed about like this, okay? And so I'm going to watch the height of it, again, from the center. I'm going to watch the height of it, and I'm going to take it to this object, and it would probably be, if that ellipse was in there, it would probably be about as high as this. Okay. So there's my placement. So we're getting placements of everything. So it's almost like dealing with notional space. Notional space, if I was to box this out, it's another way of doing it. You can do it this way. It was one of the ways I was thinking about showing you. Notional space works like a charm. So if you box that out and got the height to the width and put it in and did your next object, it would certainly do it. Matter of fact, maybe I'll do this one that way. So what I'm going to do is I know this is where the height of it's going to be at my midway point. I'm going to measure this corner for where I'm standing and how it overlaps this object. And it actually comes all the way over here, believe it or not. So it's telling me something's off maybe just a little, or is what I've got to do is for the size of it, I've got to watch its height. So I'm going to check that measurement because to me it feels way too wide. So I'm going to check the width of the top of that glass, and I'm going to check it into something else. Like let's just say the length of the other one. And it seems to come only to about here. So actually it reads pretty good in both of those directions. So I'm going to keep what I've got. So to me it looks too wide. My measurements say it's pretty accurate. So if I take that measurement from the top and I box it out, because that's my widest point, and I box it out as your notional space, that would be your notional space, if all of you remember back. Now what I can do is take from the bottom of the glass, but remember we're thinking middle. If I take from the bottom of the glass to the length of the stem and measure up, it's a little bigger on the top portion. So what I'm going to do is keep this a little bigger than that by about that much, and I'm going to say that's pretty accurate. So I'm going to place that in, and then there's a plane break. There's a width to it here. There's a Y point down here. That Y point, where is it? So I'm going to kind of guess at it a little bit, but I'm going to say it's about there, but that I'm going to eye, and then I'm going to put this in. So wherever there's a break, you want that to show. That's how you keep the symmetry. So if this is how wide this is going to be, I'm going to say about that wide right there, and eventually it begins to taper. So bring it down. My angles probably are off a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to not worry about it. Okay. So I'm going to do that. And so then is what we're going to do is we're going to put a little concave here the way that it appears. And I'm going to put a little concave here the way that it appears. And then we're going to have our center line. And our center line there is a little shy of this. So I'm going to keep it to about here. Okay. So anyways, that's going to be like that. Eventually our ellipse will go in here, and it's going to make it a little wider. So now we've got these two placed. I can check an angle like this. I get an angle on there like that. I can transfer it. It's incredibly close So I'm going to leave everything the way it is. This apple for me falls a little bit, because here's my object. Again, we're drawing through things. So that object is there, and this one probably not as much of an angle. So this apple falls a little bit more, not dead center of the object behind it, a little to the left of it. How low is it? The top of it falls roughly to here. The bottom of it is coming about to here. And the width of it falls shy of here. So for me, I'm watching what we call negative space. Negative space is the space around and between, and the apple on the other side hits this edge. So it's doing this. So I'm just going to box this in. This is my height. This is my width. I am going to taper it now a little bit and begin to think a little bit of the shape using some straight lines. We've worked with straight lines. You know all about straight lines. And there's a top to it. See the highlight? This is a top. Therefore, I'm going to come up with a plane and try to think a little bit of that top plane in there. Okay? And then a little bit of where the center is going to be. And then we'll get the widths of things and begin to slowly angle them and turn them in the proper place. So anyways, I'm going to keep that about there. So there's our placements. I'm going to take our edge. I like this angle that goes behind it. And I like this one that falls for me at an angle like this. Run things through. So I like these two angles. As a matter of fact, I think I like this one better if it was horizontal. So what I'm going to do is change it. I'm going to change what I see just because I think it'll make the drawing look better. There we go. So now is what happens when a line hits an edge, it starts to create shapes. Okay? So this line hits, it starts to break this down. Now, the only thing I don't like about this is I see this distance is a little bigger. That's not bad. But is what I'm thinking about doing, and you can do the same if you make your rectangle a little too big or whatever. I'm thinking it would look better if I made this even narrower than this by a little. And so I'm going to do that. So I'm going to come up with a new frame of reference. I don't think I need this space. So you can adjust if you need to. Because in the end, so now I've narrowed down my negative space. And I think it looks better. So this is moved slightly this way. This is a little less. So all my spaces vary. Watch yours. This is a little bigger than this. This one's a little bigger than that one. These two spaces are a little different. If all goes well, these should be a little different, and they are. So all my spaces around are slightly different than the next. Very important with a design to think about those things. Now, with all of this in place, I'm going to start to place my ellipses. So, is what I'm going to do, I know this is my center, and so I'm going to look at it. My back seems to be, the back edge seems to be a little higher than the front one. So sometimes when you're looking at ellipses, they won't be in the dead center, and a lot of times it's not the front that's the widest, it might be the back. From my case, it certainly is. So you want to sight them, you won't know just by looking at them with your eye. So that would be like this, would be the ellipse. This would be the tangent point, tangent point, tangent point, tangent point. Now, I'm going to freehand this in. I could do this, as I mentioned before. I could do this and come up with an angle in here like this. It's got to hit the corner. It's got to hit the corner. It's got to hit the corner. And this would come out like I've got it. And that would be my plane. That's a perspective plane. As long as it hits those points, it'll work. This is adjusted according to what the depth is. If I brought this up higher, it would tilt it more. If I brought it lower, it would change it. So with that in mind, I can think of my tangent points, and I can swing this around and swing this across And do the same on this side. And place in the ellipse. Okay, now, is what I want to do. I didn't hit the corner, so I want to get that corner in place. There we go. So there's our ellipse. Then is what I'm going to do is strengthen my edge, go over your lighter lines with darker lines. Okay, so once you get the ellipse in place, strengthen your lines. This one, when I look at it, is very similar. I'm going down, so technically it was what would happen. The ellipses would get a little wider as I go down. This one possibly would be a little, not a lot, because it's not too far away. They'd be very close. So I'm going to watch their distances. These are close. I'm going to make it just a little bit different, not much. So here's my center. Here's my tangent point. This one I'm going to freehand in. I do better myself if I'm not thinking about them too much. And I just place them. So anyways, this one's there. I want you to leave in this drawing your 90-degree angles. Do not change them. Keep them all in there. This is our widest point of our object. Got to have an ellipse in there. So this is coming down lower. So is what I'm going to do is make this ellipse in here about as wide as this. I'm keeping it always, because of my measurements, the way they appear, a little shorter here than in the back. I'm trying now to make this one, if it all goes well, it's a little wider than this one, because I'm working my way down below my eye level. So we're going to do that. Tangent point, tangent point, tangent point. Place in, feel the curve in there. And place in the ellipse. So much of it is the edge of the ellipse and how it goes back. So in other words, a lot of this is the curve of how far that curves in, how far this curves. And of course, these on the back side, I'm going to lighten a little, and you can with yours, but keep them in there. This then, I would want to look at it a little more carefully. And I'm going to bring it out a little bit and curve it. So we'll keep it like that. So, is what we're going to do is come down to this one. And this one I'm going to make quite wide. It's down, sitting on the table. So I'm going to make it at least as wide, if possibly a little wider. So with this one, we're going to place them in. And so now the side of our object hits that edge, hits this edge, and this becomes our low point. Okay? Off to the side like this is very challenging to get these ellipses right, so I know they're probably crooked. But with yours, you have the opportunity, of course, to be in front of them, which will look a lot better. Okay? So I know this is off a little bit, so I'm trying to get it a little more symmetrical. But anyways, the symmetry of these things is going to become all important. There is one a little lower. So I'm going to make another ellipse in here. So that that one would go behind that one. Okay? So now we're going to look at the one from behind. So I'm going to find the center of my object. And I want to make sure that's it. Always you need your centers. And it's close, but you want it to be very accurate. So I'm going to go for it again. And looks like it's about here. So with that in mind, that looks good. So now we're going to take our center, we're going to run our axis line down there. In this case, it's going to be our minor axis line. The top of this ellipse, I'm looking down on it a fair amount. It looks like it's to about there. and this one in the front. Again, sight it, make sure you know what you're doing. Actually, now it's the reverse of this. I have no idea why. The front is narrow, the back is wide. Maybe because I'm looking down on it more. So in other words, this distance is now shorter than this distance. So I'm going to bring this up a little bit. Where the other ones were the reverse. So you want to check those things. This then, we're going to come in with our ellipse. So I'm going to put that in there. Draw right through the object. I'm going to lighten that line up in a little bit. That will go there. The one underneath it now is going to come down to about here. And probably it looks like, you're trying to imagine in there, to about here. This looks good to the placement of the apple. Not used to making ellipses this way, so I can't see this side of it, so bear with me. But I'm going to leave it like that. So what's going to happen, you leave your lines in there, keep them light. I've got to dust these out ever so lightly. You need yours in there. So what will happen is I can run this line heavier in front. Keep these lines in, but keep them lighter. Keep these darker. So anyways, the handle is here. The center of it is here. So this would widen here around my curve. It should give it to me just right. This will widen in like this. And it looks like it goes back to an angle like this. And then on this side, there'd be very little that I would see from my center line. So it wraps around the curve of the object like that. I know it's probably hard for you to see. I'm going to lighten it up a little bit in the middle. So now this handle's in the right place around the curve of the object. Okay. So again, with yours, you want to keep in these transparent lines. Let there be a lot of lines. I'm wanting to see how you come by them. This one now with the top of our glass. I'm going to check it out, and it looks like on the glass, the middle part of it is almost 50-50, but I'm going to put it about here and put it about there. Looks about right. And then now we're going to make this ellipse. And then strengthen it a little bit. And then we got that edge. And so we're going to put an ellipse in here because this is a plane break. So you're going to put one a little bit higher, not much. So place that one in there. That's going to start to curve that out a little bit. The one in the bottom, I'm just going to loosely estimate it. That's going to come through. Place in the curve. And then, of course, our ellipse in the bottom, which would be roughly our widest one. It looks like it's the widest in the front from the back. So again, you're trying to watch these. This is a little wider than this one. I'm going to bring it down ever so little. And keep this one here. So you want to go back and put all these ellipses in. So anyways, once you have those in, you will go back and you will neaten up your lines. You can use a softer pencil. Make the lines clean. Make them neat. In this little stem, there'd be another ellipse in here as it goes down. And it's going to flare out to a triangle. I would want to know where that triangle is going to be. And then there'd be another ellipse at the bottom. Okay. So watch how they'll flow into each other, graceful. Watch the curve of that. So the apple is what I'm going to have you do if you do a piece of fruit like this. You'll watch this point. We did some model line drawing, so we're going to watch the feel of the curve to our sides and the planes. So you're going to watch the curve of them and place in a few model lines. So this is very deep and it comes up. This starts to turn around the top and around the side. Okay. This is coming around. There's a wide point, it looks like, which I don't have. So there's a wide point here, and then it angles in. So it's doing this, and then once it curves in, that'll start to round in a little bit this way. So watch the feel of your curves. On this side, it's going to come out to a wide point again. It's going to turn into a plane break there and another plane break there. So watch the angle of the sides. It's another time for you guys to work with these cross contours. A lot of you had a hard time getting lines on the insides of your forms. Turn them. They're just going to angle in. As it comes to me, it's going to angle in and deeper and deeper. So with this, use a series of lines. If any of you use an apple, there is a stem there. It would do the same thing. It would wrap around like that. Okay. So leave all your guidelines in. If I use guidelines, leave them all in there. Don't edit them. Start off with a harder pencil. After you work with the harder pencil, once you got all your construction lines in, begin to go back over this stuff with softer pencils so your lines are strong. Anything that's in front of something else, make it thicker. If you need to go to a 6B pencil, do it. But leave all the lines that run through your other lines. And with that, I'll leave you.